Thanks, Scott. I'm kind of laughing to myself because my wife's over here saying, "Who is he talking about?" the memory, he can't remember whether he had Cheerios or pancakes for breakfast. And Scott, I've got to hire him if I ever plan to run for office. What a spin! But it's greatly appreciated. I really. Kind words, thank you. Tonight's very special for me for a number of reasons, and I hopefully I can touch on them as the evening goes on. I do have a few things to talk about, and first of all, I want to add my congratulations to Ashley, to Catherine, and to Kyle. A well-deserved honor by all three. We could not have picked three finer student athletes to enter the Hall of Fame. Just my personal congratulations. I'd like to introduce my family members that made it here tonight. My wife, Beverly, if you'd stand up, Bev, or wave. My daughter, Carrie, is here. And my future son-in-law, Nick Panatera, is here. I have an older daughter, Jen, who's also a Newport grad that lives out in Boulder, just outside of Boulder, Colorado, and she could not be here, but I want to mention her husband, Donnie, and my grandson, who's a pistol, and his name is Landon, named after Landon Donovan. My son-in-law is a college soccer coach, so you could probably guess why they named him Landon. But I want to thank my family for being here and for all the support. Next, I'd like to thank the Hall of Fame committee, Scott Townsend, Paul Casari, Mark Waple, Chris and Linda Deanna, Gary Rose, and Randy Lombardo. And Randy was a player for me back in the 80s. Greatly appreciated. Like I said, tonight's very special for me. When I found out I was being inducted, I thought, what could I talk about? Over the course of 33 years as a teacher, almost 30 years as a track coach, 20-some years as a football coach, there's no way I could talk about specific individuals or this kid that played for me back in 70s such and 80s and 90s and so on. So that really wasn't going to work out. I never scored a touchdown. I never pinned anybody. Never scored a goal. Never was on a winning relay, so I really could not discuss that. And I'm trying to decide what can I talk about up here. And the light bulb kind of went on. I've been very, very fortunate in my entire career to have worked with some really great class, positive influence coaches. I don't like to consider anybody that I've ever worked with as my assistant coach. They were always my associate coach. And very fortunate to have worked with a number of people. I'll start with football because I did coach two sports for a long time. When I first started with football, Pete Rayo had the machine going, and I came in as a ninth grade coach and worked underneath him. I actually never coached with Pete, but was an associate working for him. But the first guy I worked with was Jim Klaus, and a lot of people don't know Jim's in the Hall of Fame. Jim was an outstanding both baseball and soccer coach, but he started off with me for the first 2 years in ninth grade with football. And again, fortunate, I started off working with a Hall of Famer. A year or two later, Mark Shea and I hooked up together. Mark and I were actually were opponents back in high school, but we got along because when Tonawanda, where I went, played Newport that year, we tied 0-0. So there was never any one-upmanship. Mark and I had a great year that year, and we went on, which I'll touch on later, to coach track. But again, Mark Shea, another Hall of Famer, another person that I was fortunate to work with. In 1979, I moved up to the varsity level football, and as an assistant worked with Lou Carreri and Jim Walker. Again, two more present Hall of Famers. In '82, I moved up to the head varsity coach, and Louis Carreri stayed on with me. Great man. Everybody loved Lou, including me. And I was fortunate to have a young guy come into the district, and again, another quality individual, Dan Maturko. Turk was a student teacher with me in 1979, and in 1982 came up to the varsity, and I always would tell people Turk was a 2-for-1 deal. Not only was he a knowledgeable, effective line coach, but back in those days there were no trainers. we as coaches had to handle taping ankles, rehabbing kids, getting the athlete ready for that following Friday or Saturday night. We had to do that ourselves. There were no trainers. And Turk had all of the training at Canisius College. He just never took the test to become a certified athletic trainer. So having Turk on staff was really, like I said, a two-for-one deal. He was a good coach and an excellent trainer, and a number of kids that we might not have had ready the following week, we did have them ready because of his efforts. And Turk couldn't be here tonight, but I'd like to say I met him in 1979 as a student teacher, and he's really been kind of a lifelong teammate, coaching teammate of mine. We still, even though I've been retired for 7 years now, we play hockey year-round together. We're on a couple of teams together. We play pickup together, and I want to extend my thanks to Dan Maturkel for all his efforts. Again, another great teammate I was very fortunate to work with. At the end, when Lou Carreri retired, Mark Johnson came on board in football, and I want to talk more about Mark when I get to track, but Mark took off right where Louis left off with coaching the defense, and again, Mark and I worked together for more than 20 years in track and close to 10 years in football. The last name that I want to mention and thank would be Mark Wapel. I met Mark when he started teaching with me at the elementary school. Mark wanted to get into coaching so bad he volunteered the first year or two, I want to say, was there every day for practice and did it on a volunteer basis until finally, I believe, a JV coaching job opened up, and went on to coach with Mark Johnson and Turk later when I stepped down. But again, thanks to Mark Wapel as well and to Mark Johnson for all your efforts. Again, I was very fortunate to be able to work with really good people, and thank you. In track, when I started in track, the program itself was in a shambles. There was talent out there, but there was very little discipline, organization, or pride in the program, and that took a while to get that turned around. It's something that would have never happened with just one coach out there. I started off, and this is where I want to bring Mark Shea back into the picture. Mark, if you don't know, Mark taught in the district for a while at the middle school, and Mark came out and coached track. He was a good track athlete and coached track with me for a year in that time when we were trying to turn things around and get track back on track, no pun intended. One of the things that I'll always remember about Mark is, at that time, the other NFL schools had girls' track teams. Lew-Port did not. There was no track team. We had girls that came out, but they had to run exhibition in the boys' races, and there were no invitationals for them because we really didn't have a Lew-Port track team. The directors got together and invited our Lew-Port girls to come to the NFL. And we went up to Kenmore East. I don't know if you remember that, Mark. We went up to Kenmore East with our handful of girls with their ragtag green uniforms, the best we could get them of what we had. And those girls kicked some butt. But we had girls on the podium. I believe it's top 6th place. We had girls on the podium in just about every event, including relays, that the girls that were there competed in those events. They were on the podium, and that really set the stage for the girls' track team, which I'll touch on in a minute, and which came on in a year or two later. But people back at Lew-Port started to ask, hey, you know, Lew-Port goes up there, there's no team or anything, but the girls are all placing and finishing up, you know, in the top with the other teams. Why don't we have a team? And that's what you have to. You have to have that community questioning, you know, to get things done. And that was really the kind of the grassroots movement to get our girls' track team going. I was very fortunate to have Bill Neidlinger and Lou Matthews join me shortly after, I think it was shortly after Mark left. It's 29 years is a long time to get the exact years right. But Nides came on, and Louis Matthews, both were outstanding coaches. They both coached different events. Louis had sprints, hurdles, and relays, and Bill Neidlinger, as we call him Nides, had the distance and got the best out of those kids. And what they were able to do also is turn that program, helping me turn that program around, where we did start to get organization, we did start to get discipline, and we did start to get pride in the program. And I don't need to tell you, if you put an equal sign after that, what it equaled. It equaled success. No longer was Lew-Port getting blown out 141 or 131 to 10, those kinds of scores. the Lew-Port program came around, and it would not have happened without Lou Matthews and Bill Neidlinger. We eventually turned it around to the point where in 1983 we were the undefeated NFL champs, and that was before the NFL went to a two-division setup. So we won that in '83. Shortly thereafter, they went to a two-division setup where the larger schools, East, West, NT, Lockport, Niagara Falls were the bigger schools, and then we had a smaller school division that we competed in. And then you won either Division I or Division II titles. We went on then through the course of our coaching together to win a total of to win or share a total of 5 divisional titles. Again, the program was turned around through the efforts of Nides and Louis Matthews. At the end, when Lou retired, Bill Neidlinger got moved to the BOCES program and could no longer coach with us at Lew-Port. Bob Smith came on. Bob was a middle school phys ed teacher and coached with me as my associate for the last 5 years, I believe it was, and started right in where Nides had left off and really did a great job bringing those runners along and maintaining, again, the pride that we had developed in our program. In 1980, again, the kind of the grassroots of the girls program was started, I want to say with that meet that Mark Shea and I went to. But in 1980, our board decided to establish a girls team, and Mark Johnson was the coach. They could not have picked a better guy. Mark and I coached for over 20 years. A lot of memories. We had so many laughs, but we got the job done out there. We used to have officials tell us they would like to come to Lew-Port because the home meets were so well organized. They ran like clockwork. And that, something like a track meet, which is like a big carnival if you've never been, it doesn't happen without effort. And Mark is an extremely valued teammate of mine, a coaching teammate, and again, I was very fortunate to have coached with him for all those years. Getting a little dry up here. I fully expect Harry's crystal ball, as I used to like to tell my elementary students, Harry's crystal ball says that in a few years I'll be sitting out there or sitting over where Mark is sitting now, and he'll be up here. He's had he's touched on it already. Relays that have been state champions, individuals that have been state champions. He continues to coach to this day. And like I said, one of my most valued coaching teammates. The last thing I want to touch on is what makes tonight special in another way, other than being so fortunate to have worked with all those people that I mentioned, is that I was one of those kids or guys that followed in their father's footsteps. My dad went to Ithaca College, graduated, so did I. I know some people say, you graduated, but yeah, I did. I made it through, and we were both IC graduates, as is Mike Gormley. Go Bombers. And he was a longtime phys ed teacher and athletic coach in the city of Tonawanda. And I was a longtime phys ed teacher and athletic coach at Lew-Port. Again, following in those steps. I believe it was the mid-70s, the city of Tonawanda Schools established their Hall of Fame, and my dad was in the first class that was inducted to their Hall of Fame. So it's really special that now, taking that last footstep, I've joined the Lewiston Porter Hall of Fame. So it's been very special. Thanks to all those people that I've mentioned. Thanks for being here, everybody. Thanks for listening. And thanks for the honor of that plaque in the hall. It's greatly appreciated.